What's up everybody, welcome back to yet another tutorial. In today's video we're going to be doing radar charts in Python for soccer analysis. Radar charts are actually one of the coolest ways to be able to compare players and compare different metrics of players. They're a little bit different than before where we did B-swarm plots where we were looking at how a player compared against the distribution of data. In radar chart what we're going to be looking at is how they compare in metrics between two players. You as well can use them to look at percentiles and do a lot of customization with radar charts, and they're really one of the most effective ways of being able to compare and contrast different players and different metrics. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using a package called Soccerplots, which is developed by Animal or @SlothfulWave on Twitter if you follow them over there. Great package, and it's really going to make it so this is going to be super easy, and I'm just going to show you how we can use the package and how we can automate a lot of the process so we're not having to type in a bunch of manual numbers. But there's a lot of customization and different things you can do with the package, and it's really unique and very valuable. If you like these tutorials, be sure to hit that like button harder than a free kick by Roberto Carlos, and let's jump into the video. All right, so let's jump right into the tutorial. We're gonna be starting off in Jupyter Notebooks, and this is super simple to set up if you've never used Jupyter Notebooks before. I have a tutorial on how to get it started in a different playlist, which I'll link right here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to start off by importing our packages and libraries that we're going to be using. So the first one that we're going to use is pandas. So we're going to say import pandas as PD. Pandas is going to allow us to manipulate our data and kind of change the data and import the CSV as well. And then we're going to be using matplotlib. So matplotlib, we'll say import matplotlib .pyplot as PLT. So matplotlib is going to allow us to plot and create a plot that we can plot on essentially. And then the next thing that we're going to need to do is, like I mentioned before, we're going to be using the Soccerplots package library. So what we're going to say is we're going to say from soccerplots.radar_chart import radar, capital R on that second radar. And you need to make sure that you have pip installed this in your command line or in your terminal, depending on which system you're running. So basically all you need to do is you need to go into your command line terminal and you just need to type in pip install Soccerplots, and it'll install everything, get it all set up for you. Because if you don't do that, then you won't be able to essentially create the radar charts, and you're going to have to manually create them, which is a nightmare. I tried it, didn't like it. This package is way easier to use. So we'll just run that. And just a quick tip, if you didn't know this, you can hit Shift Enter or Shift Return, depending on what keyboard you're using. And it will just run the cell, so you don't have to come up and hit Run every single time. If you just hit Shift Return, it runs the cell. If there's nothing in it, nothing runs, but if there is something in it, then it'll spit out a number over here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to read in our CSV. So we'll say read in the data. And this data, it's called radars in my GitHub. I'll link to my GitHub in the description below. You can download this data, but essentially what this data is it's just the Premier League data, Premier League shooting data from FBref and StatsBomb. So I'll link exactly where I got that from as well. So FBref makes it super simple to actually get the CSV, get all the data, and you can just basically turn it into a CSV straight from their thing. So we're going to read in the data, and we're going to just call it df equals pd.read_CSV, and then parentheses, and then in single quotations, we're going to put in radars.csv. If you want to use the exact same CSV that I'm using, it's just called radars.csv. And so we will run that, and then we can look at what actually is in the data frame. So we'll just say df.head, and if we do that, it's going to return the top 5 rows, essentially. So it's sorted by player name, and then we have nation, position, squad, and then we have more here. But as you can see, we have a lot of statistics on different things that are going on with the actual data. And then the next thing we're going to do is, as you can see, you don't have to do this. This is something very specific to FBref, but if you're using FBref data, then you're probably not going to want to have like where it says Patrick Van Aanholt / Patrick Van Aanholt. You're just going to want the first one right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to clean that up. We're going to say df and then player. So we have to call in the column essentially. And we're going to set that equal to df player. And then we're going to split. It's a string. So we're going to split each one of these strings. So we'll say .str, so .string, and then we'll say .split. And then in parentheses, we need to pass in single quotations, and inside of those, double backslash. Because essentially in Python, if you're indicating that in a string it has a backslash, you need to put 2 backslashes because a single backslash means something different. And then on the outside of that, we'll just say expand equals true, and then in a bracket outside of all that, put 0. So we can see what this is going to do now if we look at df.head again. As you can see, now it is only the first name, which makes it a lot easier for when we're actually using the data. So now we just have to decide really which players we want to evaluate. We're going to be recreating this one that I made right here between Tammy Abraham and Timo Werner. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to filter this data frame now to where it only has the rows of Tammy Abraham and Timo Werner. So what we'll do is we'll say df equals df and then brackets, and then in parentheses we're going to say df brackets and then quotes player. Then on the outside of the brackets, we say is equal to, so 2 equal signs, and then quotations right there, and then we're going to pass in Tammy Abraham. So you need to make sure that these are all spelt correctly. So it needs to be spelt the exact same way it is here. Like if you were to spell Tammy Abraham with 1 M, it wouldn't return Tammy Abraham. Or I know Ilke Gundogan, I really hope I just said that right. I'm not German by any means, so that was a little hard to say. But I guess we can look at Adrian, for example. If we only passed in the A without the accent on it, then it wouldn't return Adrian. We need to have the exact spelling. So a good way to get all the player names is we can replace this df.head right here. We can say df.player, but we need to make sure player has a capital P. So df.player and then .unique. So it'll pass back all of the players so you can just copy them. So we'll go find Timo Werner. He was a W, so he'll be towards the end down here. Here he is. So what you can do is you can just copy his name right here. I'll hit Command C. Then we'll go back in here. So we're going to say we want Tammy Abraham. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put this bar right here. It's on the right side of the keyboard above the enter. And then you have to hit shift and then make sure you're hitting the right button. And then in parentheses again, we're going to basically do the same thing, but for Timo Werner, we're going to say df player is equal to, and then you can just copy and paste that right in. I copied the quotations though, so make sure that your quotations are correct. So it should be red like this. You need 1 quotation on both sides. So that's going to filter the data frame for us. And then after that, we're going to put .reset_index. So this is going to make it so that it's essentially going to be a new data frame. So it's going to have the correct row numbers. So we'll do that, and we'll say .reset_index, and then we can just look at df, just check it out. So now, as we can see, Tammy Abraham and Timo Werner only. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is, I'm going to run a couple more cells so we can kind of see a little bit better. So the next thing that we're going to do is, as you can see, we have a bunch of columns that really don't mean anything for a radar chart. For example, this index right here, rank, we really don't need to know the player name because we're just going to manually type it in. We don't need to know the nation, position, squad, age, all of this. So what we're actually going to do is we are going to drop all of those column names. So the columns that we're going to want to drop, so we're going to say df equals df.drop, and then parentheses, and then we need to do brackets, and then we're just going to pass in strings of all the columns that we want to drop. So we're going to say drop index, and then we want to drop rank, so RK, and you need to make sure these are all spelled correctly as well, nation. So essentially we're just passing in this df.drop, we're passing it in a list of everything that we want to drop, all the column names. So we want to drop position, and then as well we want to drop squad, and then we want to drop age, born, and then as well we're not going to compare how many 90s they've played. And then as well, neither of them have taken any free kicks, penalty kicks, or have any penalty kick attempts. Right here you can both see they're 0, so they're pretty useless stats for us to compare the two. So we're just going to drop those as well. You don't necessarily need to drop these if you don't want to, but we are going to because they are pointless for our analysis. And these, just so everybody knows, all of these stats are they're not in per 90. If you do want per 90 stats, then you just need to divide this number by how many 90s they've actually played. The next thing we need to do is outside of this list, but still inside df.drop, we need to say axis equals 1. So what this is doing, just so everybody can understand this, we're creating the data frame again, but we're dropping all of these column names. And then axis equals 1 lets this function know that it needs to be looking at the column names, not the row names. If it was axis equals 0, it would be looking at all of these for row names, and obviously these aren't any row names. So we'll run that, and now we can just look at data frame again, and it should be set up for us to start doing some data manipulation and start creating these radars. So now as you can see, I actually wanted to drop matches as well. So we'll go back and we will type in matches, and this isn't actually going to work. This is going to give me an error. I'll show you why. So we drop matches, and it's going to say key error because what happens is we already dropped all of these. So it's going to say they're not found in axis. So what we need to do is we need to read in the data frame again and just kind of start over from the top. And it will read in the original data frame, and then we run it, and now we don't get an error. So now our new data frame doesn't have matches either. It should have dropped player. I guess it didn't need to drop player. We weren't going to drop player. Anyways. So the things we need to create a radar chart is we need a list of parameters, which is going to be our column names. And then as well, we need a list of ranges. So how we're going to create what's the starting point, like the innermost ring of a radar for a certain metric, and what's the outermost ring. And then we need to get the values that we're actually going to be passing into the data frame, into the radar. So the first thing we can do is we'll just say we're going to get parameters. So the easiest way to do this is we're just going to get a list of our column names and pass it into a parameters variable. So we'll just say params equals list of df.columns. But if you can remember, we don't need this player column. So technically we could have dropped it, but I just left it because it's easier to see who's who up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say params equals params 1 colon like that. So what this is going to do is it's going to filter this list that we've just created, and it's only going to get these ones right here. It's not going to get player because the original list is going to have all of them because we got all the column names. But what this is doing is it's starting at the first. This is called list slicing. And essentially what it's going to do is it's going to start at the first instance, the first location, which is technically the second, but because Python starts at 0. So 0 is player and then 1 is goals. So we're going to say we're going to go from 1 and then the colon says until the end. If we wanted it to stop at the 5th one, So we'd say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we wanted to stop at this one, we would actually need to put 6 here because it goes 1 until stop before this number, essentially. It's kind of confusing, but you just have to do it for a couple minutes and you get the hang of it. So we have our list of parameters. We can just look at it real quick. Oops, I probably need to type in params. So you can look at it. So there's our list of parameters and the metrics that we're going to be evaluating. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add all of the ranges. So essentially we want to find the minimum and the maximum. And then what I did is I basically added about 25% to each one, or I subtracted 25% from the minimum. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a couple of lists that are going to have our ranges and then have our first player values and then our second player values. So we'll create a couple of lists. We'll say add ranges to list. And we're going to do this. We're actually going to pass it into a tuple pair. So a tuple, if you don't know what a tuple is, it's basically a list that is something called immutable, which means that we can't change it. So we're going to pass it into this list of tuple pairs. And we're going to create a couple of empty lists to do this. So we just need to say ranges equals blank, like that. So ranges equals empty brackets. Then we're going to say A underscore values equals empty brackets and B underscore values equals empty brackets. So what this is doing is it's just creating a couple of empty lists that we are going to throw values into. Then we're going to do a couple of for loops that are going to do a loop over our parameters list and then as well over our data frame to get the ranges and all the values and put them in the list. So first we're going to loop over our parameter list. We're going to say for x in params, colon, and then we're going to hit enter. And we're going to say A equals the minimum. So A is going to be our minimum value of df and then pass in params. Then on the outside of that, another square brackets x. So basically this is going to get the minimum value of our parameter list. So up here, as we can see, it's going to go over all of our parameter lists. It's going to start with goals. And it's going to go here and it's going to say, okay, what's the minimum? Okay, it's 5. So A is now equal to 5. And then what we're going to do is we're actually just going to subtract 25% off of that. So we're going to say A equals A minus, and then right in here, A times 0.25. Okay, so that's subtracting 25% off of 5, which is going to be about 3.75. So that's going to be our minimum value. And then we're going to do the same thing for our maximum value, but we're going to call it B. We're going to say B equals max, df, same thing, params, outside x. And then we're on our maximum value, we are going to add 25%. So we'll say B equals B plus, in parentheses, B times 0.25. And then at the end of this for loop, all we're going to say is ranges.append, like this. So parentheses, and then do another set of parentheses and do A comma B. So this is going to append all of our values into, all of our ranges into this ranges list right here. We're going to get the actual values for all of our players. So we're just going to say, essentially we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say for x in range, length, and we're going to say df, brackets, parentheses, player. So we're going to be looping over our player column, essentially the length of our player column. Then we're going to say if df player, and then on the outside of that, x, then double equal sign, so is equal to, and then we need to pass in our first player name. So we're going to say Tammy Abraham. And this is where it's harder to show how to automate it. You could automate this part, but this is a part that if you're just kind of doing it by hand like we are here, not automating everything, you will need to make sure these are the same as your players that you filtered for. So then we'll put a colon, and then we'll say A underscore values equals df.iloc, and then X, and then we need to say dot values dot to list. So what this is going to do is it's going to get all of the Tammy Abraham's row essentially, and it's going to put it in a list called A values. And then we're just going to do the same thing for Timo Werner. We're just going to say if df and player X is equal to Timo Werner, then on the outside we will say B underscore values because Timo Werner is our second player. B underscore values equals df.iloc X dot values dot to list. And that is going to put all of that into our essentially into our A and B value list. So we can run it, and then just for kicks and giggles, we can look at ranges. So as you can see, those are going to be our ranges right there. And then we can look at A values. So these are all of Tammy Abraham's values. And then the same thing for the B values. Those are all the Timo Werner values. And so the last thing we're going to do, I like to do this just in the same cell. We're going to say A underscore values equals A underscore values. And then we're going to do this list slicing again. We're going to say 1 colon, because we don't want Timo Werner to be something that we're comparing. We're not comparing first names. I mean, if you want to, you can compare like the length of the names. I don't know. But we're only comparing numerical values. So we just need to make sure that we're getting rid of the first name. There's probably an easier way to do this, but for right now, we're just going to do this. We're going to say B underscore values equals B underscore values, and then same thing, 1 colon. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to create another list that is going to have these 2 lists inside of it. And we're just going to call that values. So say values equals brackets A underscore values and then B underscore values. Like that. We run it, and now we can see that values is a list that has 2 lists inside of it. So that's kind of that's how we get everything set up, and we're almost to the end. Now we're actually going to be creating the actual plot. We need to pass in a couple more things. So we're going to say we need to create a title, essentially what our 2 titles are going to be. And if we're going to be creating 2 player names, then we need to pass in we're going to be passing in more than just a title name and a color and everything. We need to pass it in essentially in 2 arguments. So what we're going to do is we're going to say title equals, and we're going to pass in a dictionary like this. We say title equals dict, and then the easiest way to do this is we're just going to say title underscore name equals, and then the first one was Tammy Abraham, so let's do Tammy Abraham, and then comma, and then we need to pass in the color, so we'll say title underscore color, and we can do, I mean, there's a lot of colors you could do if you want to compare different colors. For sake of being quick, we'll just say red, and then we need to do subtitle name, so we'll say subtitle underscore name equals, and this is where we're going to want to pass in the actual team. So we'll say Chelsea. Obviously, you can pass in whatever you want, but I think just player and team name is probably the best. And then we're going to say subtitle underscore color, and that is going to be red as well. And then we just need to do the same thing, but we're going to title these a little bit differently. So we'll just copy and paste so it's a little bit easier to do. So we're going to do title name, and then right here after it, you need to put underscore 2. And you can do this on all of them. So you say underscore 2, underscore 2, underscore 2. And then we're going to change Tammy Abraham right here to be Timo Werner. And then we need to make this blue because Timo Werner is going to be blue. He plays for Chelsea, and then blue as well. Then the next things that we're going to pass in is title font size. So we'll say title underscore font size equals 18. And then subtitle underscore font size equals 15. So this makes it so the actual title is a little bit bigger, and it's going to be bolded automatically as well, which is pretty cool. And then we also need to pass in another thing called EndNote, which essentially is where we're going to put our name and where we got the data from. So we'll say EndNote equals, and then just a string. So I say at my Twitter handle, and then if you do this \n, it'll put it on a new line, and then we'll say data via fbref/statsbomb, because fbref gets it from statsbomb. So we'll do that, and then, yeah, that's all the things that we need to make in advance. So now we can actually make the radar. So we'll say radar equals radar, like that. So this is going to essentially instantiate the object, or it's going to create the object so that we can plot it. And then we're just going to plot it down here. We're going to say fig, comma, ax equals radar dot plot underscore radar. And then this is where we're going to pass in all of our information. So we're going to say ranges equals ranges, and then params equals params, values equals values, and then we'll do another line and we'll say radar underscore color equals, we need to pass in a list. So we're going to pass in, the first one was red, the next one was blue, like that. Then we'll hit enter again, and we'll say alphas. So this is going to make it so it's a little bit more transparent. So we'll say alphas equals, and we'll do 0.75 and 0.6, like that. So alphas, essentially, if we pass in this list, it's going to make the colors transparent. So it's not just like two solid brick colors. We're actually going to be able to see the different colors and numbers. And then the last couple things, we need to say title equals title. So we need to set our title argument to the title we created. And then EndNote equals EndNote. And then the last thing, we need to say compare equals true. And that should be everything. So let's go ahead and run it. And it says that's not found. But either way, we now have a beautiful radar chart created. So a couple of things about radar charts. One, if you want to switch the actual column names that you're using, it's probably a good idea to do it either in your CSV, or if you know how to actually do that in Python, do it in Python so you can just automate it. But this kind of stuff, I mean, if you showed this to somebody and you just said, yeah, their MPXG was, it looks like it's 8.4 or something, like they're not going to understand what that means. But if you say they're non-penalty expected goals, that makes a little bit more sense to somebody who doesn't know exactly what's going on. And like SH and SOT, like you don't really know the difference unless you know that SH is shots and SOT is, what's it called? SOT is shots on target. So that is essentially the basics of creating radar charts. I would recommend as well, you can add as many parameters as you want. I recommend picking ones that are good and solid, and then probably breaking them down to per 90 stats. Like this shots on target per 90 is a lot more helpful than just total shots on target, because I mean we can go back up to the top and we can see that I guess we're not going to see it right here. Oh yeah, we'll see it right here. 90s. Tammy Abraham's only played 11 90s and Timo Werner's played 20. But Tammy Abraham has 6 more goals than has 6 goals. Timo Werner only has 5. Timo Werner is drastically underperforming his expected goal differential. So there's a lot of things you can do with these. I really like radar charts. I like looking at them. These are very similar to StatsBomb. As you can see, they're inspired by StatsBomb. So go ahead, and there's a lot of customization you can do. I'll leave the documentation in the description below so you can check that out. And there's a lot of different things you can do with them and a lot of customization. I've showed you how to automate a lot of stuff so that you're not having to manually type a lot of stuff in. If you wanted to, you could literally just hand type all your parameters, all your ranges, and all your values. It would take forever. I prefer just to do the hard stuff once and then make it so it's automated, so I'm not having, minimum work. But anyways, guys, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button harder than the Roberto Carlos free kick, and hit it more accurately than a Messi free kick, which is near impossible. Anyways, that's it. I'll catch you in the next tutorial.